Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO, Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM from New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning, and that's been at least 4 years and at least 450 episodes in. So thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so very much. Also, big thank you to Justin Snicker, a.k.a. Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, for the contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for the intro that you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music platforms. Also, thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also does phenomenal commission pieces and specializes in the horror genre, but however, does great puppy pictures. So check him out for sure. So tonight we welcome back Dan Shaw, the Vortex detective. And I guess this is part 2. He's going to be discussing, oh my goodness, vortexes, ley lines, power spots, the paranormal connections. We're going to touch on supernatural places, the Earth Code, Yosemite Tree of Life. There's so much information that we just could not get to at all on the first show. So we're really, really grateful that he's joining us again. Now, remember, guys, we are streaming simultaneously to 8 different locations. We are on Roku TV. There is no chat room on Roku, so you won't find one there. But do check us out on, of course, all of our YouTube channels, on X, and, of course, the various usual Facebook groups. I see people tuning in. Hi, Heidi. Nice to see you all the way from Boulder, Colorado. Love seeing you here. Hello, Dolly. Hello, Mark. Hey, 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 hey. Hi, Ruth. Hello. So it's great to see you guys slowly starting to chime in, and I know we're going to have a great show. So without further ado, we're going to welcome our special guest, Dan Shaw, the Vortex detective. Hello.
Hi, thank you for welcoming me back.
Oh my gosh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm so glad you're able to squeeze us in. There was so much to talk about the last time, and we just sort of ran out of time. So,
well, I'm not sure I can sit still. I'm just super excited. My heart's racing.
Me too. This is great. This is great. So, how have things been at your end? You must be getting into touring season at your mystery spot.
The mystery spot that I worked at was several seasons in Montana, but at the moment I'm working driving a whitewater rafting shuttle.
Oh my gosh.
To the local river. So I'm just spending lots of time sitting by the river, waiting for my raft to come by to take a picture, hoping that they stay right side up.
Oh,
which
that'd be a bonus.
our guides are real good. They usually stay right side up, but that's my seasonal job right now, and love it. It gets me to the river. There's actually, I stopped today, and there's a little spot which is some kind of a vortex, if you ask me. And I say that because, beside the river there, I think there's a good chance that there was deposits of placer gold. That's one possibility. And,
wow.
There's kind of a little ridge where there's some exposed rocks, which, the things around them have eroded, but they're harder
Mhm.
volcanic rock. And then down in the river there's some riffles, so again, some bedrock, really magnetic, because we're in the vicinity of Mount McLaughlin and Crater Lake, Oregon.
Right.
And so I'm pulled off at this certain spot, and it just had this kind of different little bit of energy. And I noticed there's a lot of gopher mounds there, and I like to see if they've kicked up anything interesting, But I didn't notice any. They didn't find any crystals in the gopher mounds or anything.
No, but it's curious how you could just like peck off a vortex that so easily, just by, I guess you've been doing it for so many years that you could just know the feel and what to look for.
Well, to my mind, they are everywhere. Everywhere that you have some kind of distinct landform, and especially that boundary between two different kinds of landforms, there's all, to my mind, all kinds of different elements of the surface features, the surface
Mhm.
geology, and the subsurface geology going on. But not just that, of course. I don't want to oversimplify vortexes. There's a magical component, but as
Right.
far as the geologic, geophysical, electromagnetic components and beyond, uh,
Mhm.
there's every different landform has some kind of unique, different effect. You could maybe associate it with a different chakra or a different organ of the body, even. And this one, it's just a little different energy than the
Mhm.
rest. And there's, as I say, some exposed rocks. They were kind of like little standing stones in a way, natural. And
Right.
that's the Rogue River, Oregon. So anybody passing through, just an hour north of Mount Shasta, California, anybody passing through, I can put them on a river raft.
Say you just have to say Mount Shasta and I'm there. So, and I know it's probably many of the mountains are, are loaded with different power spots and vortexes and energy lines and such. But there's just some, I guess Mount Shasta is just the more well known because it's got so much UFO activity and so many ufologists are always flocking to this place and energy workers. And so when you say it, I've not been, and I've just been so curious about it. And I know we touched on it a little bit last show and talked about many of the other mountains as well. So what makes, because it's more well known, what makes Mount Shasta just so special for the
Well,
activity?
in terms of vortex markers,
Right.
what I call vortex markers, I mean,
Right.
you just named off a few of them. Uh,
Hmm.
a lot of UFO sightings might be one. The lot of spiritual schools. Mount Shasta is kind of like a little Sedona in a way.
Mm. Oh, I just lost you. Oh, there we go. Unmute your mic. Yeah, you're muted. There, we're gone. Oh boy, come back. It's like we just lost him right in the middle of a good part. But while we're waiting, we'll see if he just comes back in. Okay, we'll see if he comes back in. So I see other people are chiming in at the same time. Hello. Hello, Wayne. Hi, Z-Sun. How is everybody? Hey, Kathy. Hello, Tamara. Hello, hello, hello. Oh my goodness. So of course, this is good Mount Shasta talk, but while we're waiting for Dan to come back in, and the reason I'm actually trying to head into this direction is Dan states at the age of 7, he started doing what's called gazing meditations and having psychic experiences. At 14, he was watching the dark sky when a UFO flashed its lights from quite nearby, which was below the horizon. In 1985, at 21, a midnight visit from an enchanting stranger eventually led Dan from the San Francisco area to Austin, Texas, where he began studying alchemy. That's interesting because we've had guests come on and talk about alchemy before, but he was focusing on the subtle energies of the earth and he travels extensively in the US and abroad, researching sacred places with local vortex experts, and he corresponds with researchers all over the world. So he's earned a Bachelor of Science in Geography, which was in 2001. He's authored a number of books on vortexes, including the Vortex Field Guide, North America, Letters from the Vortex, U.S. Vortexes, 54 miles wide, Stonehenge gardening. That's one we'll have to touch on sometime. Using earth energies in your garden. But I think I can do that. Anyway, Dan can access the subtle energies of your land, home, business, and help to adjust energetic field for greater harmony, health, and success. So that's right there. That tells me that, you know, he knows his stuff. He's been at it for a really long time. But what a peculiar thing just to get into. It all started with a sighting and this midnight visit, which I do want to find out a little bit more about. But for those of you guys who are a fan of Brad Meltzer's Decoded, I used to love watching this show. It was really, really great show. It was a lot different. And the episode was called Devil's Triangle, Alaska. And it aired on the History Channel. You guys could probably find it on all kinds of streaming platforms. And the Mysteries of the National Parks, Yosemite, also on the Travel Channel. And the documentary called Ancient Tomorrow. So definitely go check them out because I have no doubt. I mean, I've watched the Brad Meltzer episode. And it was just excellent. Excellent. I'm just checking the email because I have a feeling we're going to be waiting for Dan. Hold on. See where he's gotten. Oh, nope. Okay. So we're going to be waiting, it seems. So while we're doing this, I don't know what's going on with him. But what I thought I would touch on are different power spots. Okay, so Joe and I did a great show called The Gray Zone Uncensored. And this went on probably for about 2.5 years. And it was really popular. It cannot be found. Unfortunately, it's a paper. It will be a pay-per-view thing, I think, on Roku. But there's a lot of phenomenal segments. The show just had tons and tons and tons of listeners, and we were so humbled by it. But we did some research type things. Hold on. I think our guest came back. Hold on. I'm back. How are you?
Oh, I'm good to be back.
Oh, good.
It's totally inexplicable. I apologize, but I cannot explain.
No, well, we thought we might have lost you in a vortex somewhere. Okay.
Go ahead and make fun.
I was thinking, Wayne mentioned, he goes, I think a vortex might have got him. Like, wow, if you spend enough time in them, I just want to know what's on the other side. So, okay, we were on Mount Shasta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gosh, it is true that sometimes our own electromagnetic field and the geophysical field can mess with our electronic equipment. And sometimes there's just no explaining it. I hear these. Perhaps you can confirm this yourself. Have you had spots that like drain your electronics equipment, or you just, things you lose data, or tell me?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I've traveled in many different parts of the world. And ironically, I'm always drawn to the mountains and the Alps and things like that. So I always try to spend time there. And I find if it's going to happen, it will be there. And not because you're necessarily away from, society. Most of the places we go to now are pretty touristy for the most part, the Carpathians or the Pyrenees, things like that. But you can still find, I was still getting Wi-Fi or a signal no matter what on the top of a mountain. But there are just certain parts, like let's talk about for a moment Hoia Baciu Forest in Romania. I had a perfect signal and everything was dying up there. And there was a strange sound coming from the forest itself. It was like a humming or droning sound, like a just continuous, and it never stopped. And it's known as Romania's Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, wow. And were there other people who were hearing that same sound? That was something that was common to, okay.
Yeah, we were a group of 4. Yeah, we all heard it. All the trees were sort of wrenched in these weird, crooked
That I've heard
No,
before. Yeah.
no birds. Like
Mhm.
there was one circle up there. There was no birds. We saw insects, no wildlife. But I'm sure beyond that circle, there was obviously, it's a very dense forest, but found out after the fact that it was under a no-fly zone. And the story goes that a shepherd and 100 sheep went missing way, way, way back in the day and never found. And then a little 5-year-old girl went missing and she resurfaced 5 years later, still 5 years old, but she wasn't right mentally anymore. She was just like not right. And, but she resurfaced. UFOs are seen there by the locals. People have been hurt, scratched, picked up, pushed. I mean, it is just a crazy, crazy area that I had the privilege of spending time in and coming out unscathed.
Well, you just mentioned a bunch more vortex markers here.
Okay.
Now, what about smells? Are you aware of any places that have like a paranormal smell to them? Did we talk?
Um,
We didn't talk about this last time, or did we?
I think we just touched on some, but it was towards, after we didn't really get into a whole lot of the paranormal, which was why I think we wanted to spin off on supernatural places and more paranormal or UFO stuff or, there's so much I want to cover. It's where do we begin? But I know sometimes, there'll be the smell of sulfur. And there were little glimpses of that over there, but really nothing. I expected more because I have picked up on that in places where there have been portals, alleged portals, just in somebody's residence, where you can smell the sulfur pretty strong.
Oh wow, okay. I hadn't heard sulfur before,
Yeah.
but I have heard various kinds of things, cigar smoke from people who maybe had been there in the distant past, like
Oh wow. So
yeah,
just coming through it, maybe. Yeah.
coming through veil,
Flowers I've smelled.
ex- common for your more benevolent spirits, I might think.
Yes. Yes. Is it a spirit? Like sulfur can be attributed to for people of faith, they will say, well, no, the demonic smell like sulfur. For people who study ufology, they'll say, so do extraterrestrials. Encounters, people have picked up on the smell of sulfur.
I hadn't
I
heard that.
tend to wonder with vortexes, maybe in areas like the mountains where you may have cave systems, in the area where you might have volcanoes in the area, would you pick up on that sort of smell? Because I've been in the mouth of a volcano, a live volcano when I was in Santorini. That was like sulfur, of course, but
Well,
it was
sure.
just wonky feeling there, the whole island.
Well, you also mentioned what I call time slips, because the
Yes.
5-year-old who came out 5 years later, still 5 years old, more or less. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
And so there's some kind of parallel there with like smells coming through from a different time and also people having time slip experiences at certain places. And since this is our second show, I was pondering, how could I go in maybe just a slightly different direction than we did
You
last time?
take it away. Yeah, you take it away.
We don't want to necessarily presume that folks have heard the first show, but we talked about well, if I were to jump right to the end, perhaps just to kind of
Right.
segue people through, I have
Okay.
I have a principle about vortexes, which every researcher comes from a different angle.
Right.
Mine is this: there's an infinite amount of energy available everywhere, all the time,
Right.
all the time,
Right.
for our physical healing,
Right.
for our psychic opening,
Right.
and for harmonizing the planet.
Right.
So that's kind of where we hopefully the beginning, middle, and end is there. I approach from the standpoint of the unity between the human energy field and the planetary energy field for the purposes of our physical healing, our perfection, our chemical perfection and ascension, our physical ascension. So that's kind of jumping right to the end now. But in terms of vortexes and going a slightly different direction in this show, these couple hours, it occurs to me that as I'm pondering, the last couple hours,
Take it away.
that
I'm on board.
there's we're my specific focus has to be the places that have a contribution, let's say, to the paranormal, an association, a relationship to the paranormal places.
Right.
So in order to study that, I've had to kind of sweep aside uh, paranormal things that I can't kind of anchor down to place.
Hmm.
So when we're talking about vortexes, I'm very much like place centric in terms of, here's a place, what are its physical and geophysical properties, yes, and that all places are one. They are all equally powerful in a certain sense. They're all parts of the earth. The earth itself is a giant vortex. Yes, all that.
Hmm.
But there's this element that came back to me from something my co-author Nick Nelson said, and I kind of brushed it aside the first time. And Nick Nelson and I have traveled across the country. We visited all the tourist attractions that are genuine vortexes across the
Mhm.
country. There's 8 of them. At the time, there were 9. One's shut down. But we wrote the Vortex Field Guide around that. And he has worked with magnets all his life and developed an actual portable vortex, an arrangement of magnets that
Wow.
recreates this natural vortex effect. And I had demonstrated that on Brad Meltzer's Decoded on the History Channel. So that's Nick Nelson. And he and I worked together at the Montana Vortex leading tours. He for more seasons than I did. But he had said to me, Nick Nelson said that, well, first of all, there's a profound macrocosmic quantum physics. I want to say quantum physics
Hmm.
does occur on the macrocosmic level. And that's
Okay.
what I'm trying to. So that he suggested that there's this phenomena of a giant orbiting electron somehow involved in these vortex places.
Mm.
So to my mind, I couldn't reconcile that at the time he told me. But within the last couple hours, I've been thinking about this show, and it occurs to me that yes, there is an element of vortexes which is not anchored in place and that is maybe passing through in a certain sense.
Hmm.
That is, it's not there all the time. And in the past, I've thought of it as vortexes having this cycle of charging and then discharging, like they're not in the same state all the time, as we're not in the same state all the time either.
So they move. Are you meaning like are they physically moving, or are we talking like shifting, like as in time step, dimensional?
Well, good. We definitely want to think of them in multi dimensions, and
Okay.
uh, and in terms of this time cycle. But in
Right,
terms of,
because they can appear and disappear really quick, right? So
oh, that's my experience
okay.
for sure. With in terms of UFOs,
That too.
those
Yeah.
those appear and disappear really quick. I'm not sure if
Right.
it's vortex related, but
Right,
uh,
right.
the if we think of the whole planet as a spinning vortex in the most physical sense and nothing metaphysical about it, it's spinning. We can think of it as a model of it. We can think of like the ball of twine, where every great circle, like the equator, it's just a ball of twine, and every piece of twine is essentially vibrating like a violin string. And then
Mm.
there's all this interaction between all these strings that we think of as ley lines. All these strings interact, and they either zero each other out. There's positive and negative ones, or they double up. There's constructive interference or destructive interference of these waveforms. So you get nodes and nulls, as the
Mm.
teacher Cryon talks
Right.
about in that terminology. Or you might get like positive, negative, neutral, or yin and yang, different classifications of these
Mm-hmm.
vortexes. But there's all that going on. But then there's an element of, well, these lines are not just lines, but they're perhaps like sinuous waveforms or spirals, or we tend to think of them as like cross sections and two-dimensional on a piece of paper and a map or diagram, but definitely multidimensional. They're expanding and contracting on certain time cycles, which we find to one of the time cycles seems to be about 6.5 minutes.
Mm.
Uh, so um,
So
I
that's different because they're there. That would give credence to reports where people have claimed to look into a vortex and be able to see landscapes or buildings. Like, is that even possible to be able to see into and just see something else? That would make it pretty dimensional.
well, I'm not the right guy to ask if something's possible because my mind
Right.
is. I'm in a shamanic reality
Right. It's all
where magic
possible.
happens. It's all possible,
Yeah. Because
and
there have been reports of this, like several.
yeah, definitely. To my mind, credible reports because I hear from people all the time, and this is the
Mhm.
perfect time to invite your listeners. I invite you, listeners, please contact me. I'll answer every email. You can contact me through my website, which is vortexmaps.com. When you send me an email, I'll reply by sending you a free ebook. This time it'll be How Vortexes Affect Us, a link to download free ebook. You
Oh,
can
okay. I'm going to put
contact
this up for
me.
everybody. One
Great.
moment. One moment. I want to make sure I put this up in the. Here we go. I'll put this up in all the feeds. There we go. All right. So that's where you guys got to go for your free ebook. There we are, right there.
So
And
I
I've got it in the show description as well.
thank
So
thank you. So I invite you to share with me your stories of paranormal places. Uh, to, I hear paranormal stories. I'm going to say almost every day because the
right.
minute I tell people that I'm the vortex detective, which I mean, I can barely get through 30 seconds of an introduction without telling people I'm the vortex detective. Uh,
Right.
I then I will hear people's paranormal stories that
Right.
fast. People will just
Right.
respond by telling me their paranormal stories, and those are, of course, fascinating to a degree. But it's
Mhm.
the ones that are place based that I'm
That you're
really
really looking for.
trying to understand what is it about certain places in this phenomena, which is this interdimensional gateway, which is like
Mm.
kind of the ultimate vortex. Yeah, not just a healing vortex, but some kind of that is. I mean, it's some kind of transient phenomena to the degree it's physical, but if it is to the degree that it's magical and non-physical and due to intent and magic and ceremony,
Mhm.
then it's not necessarily transient. So that's a little hard to tease out.
Well, I know any research that I've done because I've done shows on this. If memory serves me correctly, some people who have gone through what they believe is a vortex, some will experience missing time, which kind of puts you to the UFO phenomenon a little bit, and other people report like time just sort of stands still. They have different feelings. They feel a little bit separated from themselves, if that makes any sense. I know being at Hoya Batu, the forest of Romania, the sound was sort of interesting, but it also had a feeling of you can go to some areas and feel very empowered and full of energy. And then you go to another part, not even that far away from where you were, and you feel drained and you feel tired.
Exactly right. And I thank you for bringing us back to this because you were describing what I would call a negative vortex. Now,
Okay.
I don't, I'm using negative in that sense of meaning like
Yeah.
not good, not beneficial, not good for your health.
Right.
Yeah, not just like an electromagnetic positive, negative
Right.
cathode and anode, something like that. But this is not good for your health. It's
Right.
important for people to recognize that some places are not going to be good for their health for whatever reason. If you can identify it, or maybe you can't identify it, it's maybe purely
Hmm.
non-physical and energetic and etheric. But there may be an energetic reason, maybe water flowing underground, or these negative grids that are called the Hartman grid and the Curry grid.
Mhm.
It's hard to know sometimes what it might be, but to be aware that I'm not feeling that great, maybe it's place related, and I just need to relocate myself.
I agree. It was definitely a melee of different feelings and different experiences, and we all reacted similar, yet had a different tolerance for some areas of this area more than, let's say, in the other areas. Like I did better, let's say, than my colleagues, and then as we moved along, they seemed to fare up a little bit better. I just felt really tired. It's strange. There's just a lot of crazy stories, but I mean, I would agree if you have a place where people can just walk through a dimension, like into another dimension, and then reappear. How many years later? That a time slip, missing time, time stands still. It seems to fall in all of this. It's the humming sound or the droning sound that's interesting to me, and being under no-fly zone. At the time, it was under a no-fly zone, which we didn't know. The airport, we could see planes going around off in the distance, but nothing ever came over the mountain.
Okay.
So interesting. Just food for thought. I mean, there's a lot of different stories. Mountains seem to be, national parks like the missing 411.
Right. Well, if we could just reflect for a minute on
Yes.
what you're saying there, that these you almost had kind of an experiment going there. I mean, it's nice to have
Mhm.
compatriots with you who can kind of validate your experience, but
Yes.
you'll have different experiences because you have different like constitutions, different things going on with you, and you can find in these places. So first of all, we think that the energy there is very turbulent.
Yes.
So it's not uncommon to have a lot of different feelings going on in the
Mhm.
same place over a
Mhm.
period of, let's say, 6.5 minutes or 13
For
minutes, right?
sure.
Right. So
For
you don't
sure.
necessarily have to move because there's this turbulent energy that you're in anyway. But then as you move across the landscape, you can think of these different places as having being very much like an anode and cathode. In other words, there is an energy flow and it's going
Mhm.
from one uh, electrode to another. And
Mhm.
that may be an electrode in the landscape, or it may be that you are playing the part of one of those electrodes.
W See, that's something I wondered about as well, because the energy that we felt, I don't think anybody slept that night. We were just, like, amped right up. But I also know that there was a really popular television show that was about 3 days ahead of me when I was there, and they had horrific experiences. Terrifying. I can't tell you, again, 'cause, I work in media, so I had other people I know who had been to the same forest both times, really bad experiences, yet we did not have bad experiences. We had incredible visuals, like things that we were seeing, like trees just bending down and you could hear them. We saw a tree line that looked like it was just sort of like an energy was just coming over it. It was just looks like it was bending down. I'm like, is this an illusion? Are we just being made to look like we're seeing this, or is something actually bending the tree line down? And then that was the end of that, and there was no wind. It was a really hot July night. No wind, no breeze, nothing. It was just stifling hot.
Well, I'm not totally sure I understand what you're describing there, of course, because it doesn't like fit a normal. Oh, the trees were blowing in the wind, so
Paranormal then, I don't know.
right. But if I can relate it to vortex, uh,
Yes.
as I like to, if we think of this energy of a place as being not the ley lines, but maybe where ley lines cross, you have this place.
Mm,
I call it a vortex. We can think of it as being, not a spot on the map, but a sphere that
mhm,
on the ground, the cross section, if we were to draw it on the ground, the cross section would be a circle or even a series of concentric circles showing kind of a layered effect there. And that sphere
mm,
of vortex might be mostly underground, partly underground, mostly above ground, but there's this kind of spherical effect.
Hmm.
And it's as you stand, and we call this gumball model, these lines, we call them lines of demarcation.
Okay.
Have a word for it. So you can kind of imagine this cross section of a jawbreaker. Yeah, it has
Hmm.
several layers. It's got kind of a central layer. It's got a corona around it,
Hmm.
but it's spherical. So that if you were standing on one side of it, and I was standing, let's say, inside of it, now there's this kind of lens shape interface between us.
Hmm.
Yeah, that if this were light coming through, it might deflect or refract the light coming through because there'd be this, so to speak, different densities or different electromagnetic energies, perhaps
Mm-hmm.
inside and outside of this spherical
Mm-hmm.
vortex. So you might see kind of this lensing or bending, or what we call the shrink and grow effect. Now,
Okay,
your
that's
trees, back to
interesting.
your trees, were you actually
Yes.
watching your trees like bend down and like deform? Is that what you're
Well, we
describing?
saw one tree completely. We could hear a cracking sound, and when we looked over, this tree was going down like this and snapped back up. And then later on, much later in the evening, as evening set in, probably this might have been around, I would think, 10 o'clock at night, um, we could see what looked like, the best way I could describe it is, let's, when you, if you were walking over brush and the trees were, you're just bending down as you were walking, they seem to be coming down, but not all at once, like something was going over it.
Wow.
Best way I could describe it.
Now, when you say the crew, the film crew had a bad experience because you're interested in malevolent spirits, I'm not sure if a bad experience is good or a bad experience means they
Oh,
didn't get good
oh
footage.
no, this was just vacation time for me. I wasn't filming that night. No, this was just something that we were there and we experienced.
But you say the film
Oh,
crew,
they were 3 days ahead. These were whole other people. And they, when they aired the episode, I went, these guys were 3 days ahead of us, and they had terrible experiences.
terrible like hauntings.
Oh yeah, they were crying. They felt like energy, like they put their hand through this area. They felt the energy. Like, oh, it was crazy. A lot of theatrics, I'm sure. But all I'm saying is, like, we didn't experience those type of things. However, we do know upon leaving, we did feel like there was a very strong energy behind us. And we just like, okay, yeah,
Mm.
bye. So that was it.
Now, what do you can you tell me what you do in terms of like psychic self-defense? Because you're kind of going around looking for trouble in a certain sense.
Oh, trouble finds me, Dan. I am an energy worker. I do a lot of global stuff. I have worked with energy lines and ley lines, and I have worked with, a group of individuals, and a couple specifically, where you could just tap into locations very easily and work with energy,
What do you
planetary stuff. It's great.
Can you be more specific? What do you mean? I mean, everybody means something different when you say you're working with the ley lines. Tell us what that means for you.
Well, for me, sometimes, and again, I don't know if I'm going to explain this properly, but sometimes you just get to some areas, and especially areas that I visited, and things just seems like it backs up. Does that make sense? Energy just feels like it becomes stagnant or it backs up,
Sure.
and you come in, and it's just a matter of working with that energy, almost like you're just giving it a good, you know, boot in the butt sort of thing, and it just powers it up and sends it off in a proper direction. It gets the energy flowing, I
Mm.
guess, is the best way to put it.
Can you do that for me?
Not probably.
Yeah,
You
no,
just kick in the behind and just, yeah.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. Because
Yes.
energy, it's important for energy to pool, but
Yes.
also to flow. We don't want it to be stagnant. And
Yes.
so if you're sensitive to that and or if you're not, perhaps, I mean, sorry, if a person is not sensitive even, and they go to a certain place and they're there with presence and with love and gratitude and perhaps some ceremony and intention, that in itself will shift the energy. Uh,
Yeah.
and again, people don't even need ceremony, really, just being present in the place, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
See, there you go. I don't know. For me, it's been very much an interesting experience. I just go to places throughout the world. And if it feels like that, it's like, oh, but we can tap into these places. And other people who do energy work and planetary work with good levels of mediumship, you can tap into these places quite easily and see where they're sort of jammed up. And you just, you can just work with that energy. In fact, there's a lot of people who I call boots on the ground, who are familiar, like yourself, for example. You know where these vortexes are. And people who do energy work, who come across these same areas, can very easily lend their energy or manipulate that energy to do many different things. Sadly, there are people out there who know how to use it not for good, but on an average, planetary workers are people who want to see the planet flowing well, gardens growing nicely, trees happy, forests happy, the water going smoothly. You just manipulate that energy and work it so everything is in harmony, I guess is the best way to put it.
Completely agree, 100%. Everything you've said,
Thank you.
brilliant. Yes, and now, are you working in the non-physical? When are you moving any rocks? Are you doing anything physical?
No.
I know many people who are grid workers,
Yes.
who I call grid workers actually.
Right.
And some are they're they're not touching anything, and others are sometimes leaving crystals or certain kinds of devices.
Nothing like that.
Yeah,
No, no.
I have mixed feelings about that.
Yeah, no, I don't like to alter
Yeah.
anything physical like that. But I
Right.
mean, if I'm someplace like, again, in the mountains when I'm visiting, I can put my hands on stones. I can put my hands on the ground. I can feel that energy.
Mm-hmm. And I think I asked you this last time, but tell us again. How does that? How do you sense it? How do you feel it? I think you said, correct me if I'm wrong, that it was just a knowing. Did you?
Mm.
What did you say?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it for me, and I know it differs for different people, I'm sure,
Yeah.
but I do know where there are. I guess for me, it's just a buildup of energy. That's how I can tell. Not that I haven't seen them. I have seen, right, driving one night. I just look over and I could see this huge, almost like a half moon, like an arch, half circle,
Mm-hmm.
right in the, like, what appeared to be in the sky, of all pastel colors. And I could just see these colors sort of just doing this. And I'm going, it's got to be the sun. But I mean, it's like completely, it wasn't dark. It wasn't, I guess we were at dusk. I'm going, it's got to be the sun, which was totally out to the west. And I was totally to the north,
Well, okay, but
facing the north.
from here, I can't say for certain that was a vortex, but your experience of it was you were seeing the place, the
I
energy
was
of
seeing
the place.
something, and that's just one time out of
Right.
different experiences I've had.
Right.
And I acknowledged it and I watched it. And then and it's funny because I was with Wayne and I'm just like, do you see this? Like, do you see this? And I had a vision of that probably a few months before, and not far from that spot. And it was exactly the same. And I was physically seeing it, wide awake, obviously. And he's like, I don't see anything. I'm just like, what? It's huge. How do you not see this? And he's like this. He's going, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm just like, I thought I was just losing my mind.
Oh, and you're not. I've heard it so many times. People say this is going to sound crazy that I'm thinking of calling my screenplay.
Ah,
I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. But
yes.
your eyes are picking up a different frequency vibration than the next person. So
And I and
sometimes
I
they can
work in
validate,
frequency.
sometimes you can't. But
Yes.
now I started out with like psychic self defense.
Right.
Now you're an energy worker, so maybe you're wearing certain stones or certain talismans, or you strengthen your aura. Come on, tell us,
Sure.
spill.
But I know how to push away energy as well. I have no problem clearing negative energy.
Uh,
I've helped people for 2 decades doing that.
yeah, yeah. So, but do you teach psychic self defense? Like, what do you say for people who like they feel like they're being, harassed?
I believe a lot is mindset. I believe that we are very powerful individuals and people just need the tools. They need to be educated. I used to have an 18-month waiting list, and I would just work with people online just by empowering them, just by giving them tools to take control. And it's amazing when people can do, they're given something to do to take control, they do.
Hmm.
And a lot of times it's things like psychokinesis, telekinesis, projection of energy. And when you can work with them, and sometimes they see themselves going, yeah, that was totally me. And then things completely calm down. We are powerful beings. We are made up of energy, vibration, frequency, all of that. We jive with planetary energies. If you come into contact with a vortex, you can completely connect with it. We're powerful. I think it's just sometimes easier for people to think that there's something there in their space, but a lot of times it's a projection of energy, which in the field they would call poltergeist activity. It's a projection of energy, our
You're
energy.
you're telling me that the way you understand poltergeist energy is that it is a projection of an individual's energy. That's how what you've come to.
Some of it, yeah.
Well,
Yes,
yeah,
for
okay, yeah,
people.
I would agree. I would agree some of it,
Yeah.
but not all of it.
Hmm.
I mean,
Sometimes it's just a
I'm asking.
compound of
I'm
energy
asking.
that's left over, right? Like,
Well, I
what's your
definitely.
version of poltergeist activity?
Ooh, well, I where I think it's not outside my field of vortexes because I think
Right.
that some spirits do seem to be anchored to place, like in terms of hauntings, as I understand it,
Like the ancient Ram Inn in the
imagine it.
UK. That's a
Oh,
big one.
I don't necessarily know about that.
Oh yeah, the ancient Ram Inn, on the I think it's on the Isle of Wight or the Isle of Man in the UK, is a place that has had poltergeist activity. They say for hundreds of years.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't doubt it.
Yeah,
My just in my imagination,
right.
uh, when people are discarnate, when they die, when they leave their body, when the spirit leaves the body, it's to me it seems likely that they would return to places where they either have some kind of energetic hook, like
Mm,
they return to the battleship with their crewmen who they were so bonded with during the war or whatever. Why
mm.
battleships are haunted, right? Or maybe it's scene of massacre or something. People get anchored.
Do they
There's
return or are they stuck? Maybe they don't realize they've passed on.
something
Yeah.
to that effect, right? There's some
Okay.
very place related aspect to this spirit being anchored. But I think
Mm.
other spirits are maybe more anchored to people
Sure.
than place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm just for the purposes of kind of setting the scope of what I'm studying,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm trying to understand like if I'm having some kind of psychic experience, like is
Right.
it me? Is it the place?
Yeah.
How can we tease out these different elements? And
Mm-hmm.
because I do think like again, vortexes are everywhere, this infinite energy is available to us everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We are totally at one with our planet. There is
Mm-hmm.
no separation. Just to kind of up the ante from what you said about we can
Yes.
connect with our place, there is no
Yes.
disconnection from an alchemical standpoint. Separation is part of the illusion of our limited perception,
Right.
and
I love that.
so
I do. I love that.
so that I like to
It's
think
all
of.
about alchemy. People don't quite understand that. There's a lot to do with alchemy.
Thanks for underscoring that point. And to my mind, um, what we're seeking is this to let go of the illusion of separation.
Right.
That we're it's I have compassion. I th- you know for myself and other humans to some degree that just in order to have this experience in this physical world that we, our organs of perception have a certain limitation to them. And then on top of that, there's only so much we can even believe, and if we can't believe it, we really can't see it. And I've had, or can't even remember it when it happens, right? Because people have this kind of coping mechanism, right? Something happens that is like the glitch in the matrix. That's the
What just
ontological,
happened, right? Like,
which the technology,
no,
which what
the glitch, where people have had reports of birds just sitting still,
oh
or cups just hanging, just sitting there in midair, and they go to touch it and it drops. There's a state trooper who did that, and he
yeah,
videotaped something.
oh
What's
yeah,
that about, Dan?
yeah. I can't say for sure,
See, that's
the
crazy. It's like
glitch
one
in
of those. It's like one of your mystery spot things.
well, I would say that again, we we have a limited perception of what we're willing to see. Now at the vortex, Nick Nelson set about to map the vortex. So he had a certain building and he was going to sight down this building to establish a sight line. Okay, and there's a tree in that sight line. He was drawing a little map. The next day, looking down that same sight line down the side of that building, that tree was no longer in that sight line. And I've seen this myself over a period of just a couple of minutes of standing still at a vortex with a sight line eye level on a marker and just watching myself shrink and grow relative to that other fixed point and other people as well. So there's, our limited perception fixes things. And it's this electron that I was speaking of earlier, right? If you'll go into the quantum world, what we'll find is that we can't establish both a velocity of a particle and its location at the same time. We can establish either one or the other. And again, as the observer, we come in with the observation and bam, we fix the location of that particle when we look at it. And so, to my mind, there's a similar thing going on at the vortex. So we're the integral part of that. We come into the equation and there's something that happens, and that's kind of like a waveform collapse or some such thing.
What would happen if you just went through a vortex? In your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, it's very likely to be a one-way trip.
Okay. So what would you describe, let's say, the little girl at Hoyabatsu or Bermuda Triangle? People disappear who've made their way through one-way trip, huh?
To the extent that people do slip through this veil or this, rift between dimensions, to the extent that that happens, however rarely, it's going to be even more rare that somebody makes the return trip. Now, again, I'm going to turn to Nick Nelson, who spent a lot of years, first of all, at the Oregon Vortex in House of Mystery, just up the road from me, moved to Oregon to work and research there. And then when that panned out, Nick moved to Montana to work at the Montana Vortex and set up a bunch of demonstration points. Full visionary in terms of vortexes. That's my co-author, Nick Nelson. He has an experience, he tells, where he had his hands out in front of him. He was dowsing, and he very nearly went through. And he had an observer. He had a person with him who saw his hands essentially disappear as they went through this, I would say, veil or rift.
Right.
And he saw it happen and was able to back out. So I would say wouldn't go looking for trouble. I myself, I've committed to, if I have another chance to go through, I'm going to go through. So
Oh,
I've
really?
I've told my loved ones that, and this, I hope I'm not asking for trouble, but if I have another opportunity to go through, I'm committed to going through.
Would you? Why? What's the driving force? Knowing that you most likely will not be able to come out. What
Well,
would make you want to go in there? Because it could be infinite nothing, or you can end up in a whole other
I
dimension
mean,
world.
it's yes, you have no idea. You have no idea
Yeah,
what if you're
right.
gonna. I mean, you could end up, like the Philadelphia experiment is reported to
Yes.
be, where you're embedded in the
And
deck of a
metal, the
battleship
ship.
or something, right? You don't necessarily
Yes.
go through the
Yes.
transporter and come out, in
Right.
a good in you might come out in midair. Who's to say you're going to come out at ground level?
Right. Right. I know. I thought about that.
Right? Would you get
Um,
on the ship if the ship came down and invited you in? Would you?
yes, I think so.
Yeah,
Because I've heard stories, and one of these stories came from somebody that we know when they were young, and they were running around the house playing. I may have told us on the last show.
yeah,
All of a sudden, and I don't know if it was a motion of running around a certain amount of time, he disappeared, and he could hear his family calling for him. He couldn't see them anymore, and he ran back counterclockwise and came back and found the family. They were all there, but there was missing time of 2 hours. So, vortex or time shift. The little girl in the forest disappeared for 5 years,
uh,
came back, still the same age at 5, but wasn't right upstairs anymore. Like she was just it damaged her, it changed her in
yeah.
a way that. So, what is the difference between the two experiences?
Well, one thing to underline in what you said there was about running around in a circle, because by the very act of moving in a circle, you do create a vortex.
Well, okay.
And then
So,
these places themselves, if you think of, okay, what is the shape of a vortex? Hmm. Well, this
mhm,
gumball, kind of many layered gumball model, well, that's a pretty good model. But what's
mhm,
also important is where we're standing in relationship to this energy. And you might think this energy may be more of a toroidal or donut shape. That's even more of a kind of a primordial shape, is this kind of smoke ring
mhm,
toroid shape. And we're standing somewhere on this very complex, at least three-dimensional energy there. And so where are we standing in relationship to it? And it's got some kind of a spin to it, which it might be like an X, Y, or Z
mm,
axis to that spin. So we're engaging with it by moving in a circle.
right. So you can actually create it. That's crazy. You know, I used to do ghost tours at a location, and the city hall used to complain that there were always accidents happening on that certain corner. And they would often see people in period clothing just appear in their courtyard. So they had a feng shui person come in, and they built this huge fountain, running water, which changed the dynamics. But it didn't stop people. Like, they were still seeing people coming in middle of the day. They look outside and they would see people in period clothing, and it was
Uh,
captured on camera. There are photos of one of these, disembodied energies in period clothing. But it's funny how something just like running water can change or shift the energy of an area.
well, absolutely. Running water, pooling water, earth, air, fire.
The elements.
We can use all of these elements to shift the energy in the place. Now, I have a teacher named Roger Armstrong,
Hmm.
and he has a website which is wasapsychicchild.com. And he teaches psychic self defense in some of the 35 videos that I've done of Roger. He describes two types of travel: the astral travel that we're familiar with, AST,
Yes.
RAL, astral travel. People
Mm,
are most most commonly familiar with astral
mhm.
travel, and that's where you're traveling. Essentially, you're leaving your body behind, hopefully connected with a silver or a gold cord, right? So you can
So
home
they say.
at home, right?
Right.
But there's a according to Roger, though, there's another kind of travel which is astral travel. He calls it ASTROL, astral travel. And then in that case, you're traveling with your physical body and you're subject to potential physical harm traveling in that form. So and Roger also has experiences of people coming through kind of in both ways, both to this time and place, and both astrally and astrally,
Mm.
people coming through. So your people may be um, visible in this other, I mean, visible in this dimension from some other time, because you're saying period clothing, they're coming from some, past
Somewhere.
time, yeah,
Hmm.
and which is, I think, not uncommon in
Hmm.
terms of these experiences. And um, but it's also possible that there's this other phenomenon going on where beings are coming through in the physical, and or maybe in the form of orbs, or some other
Well,
thing.
I can expand on it a little bit. When people used to stand around it within the area, they would stand around in a circle and it would pull them. And they would start out like this. And they thought they were standing up straight, but they're like this. And at one point, there are
100%.
some people that get down really low. And I would just be amazed that they didn't fall flat on their faces because they would look at me and I'd be like, but they weren't bent over. It's almost like they were pulled and
Well,
didn't,
very
right?
much so. Very much so. This is common at
Oh,
Vortexes,
okay.
and there's a couple things going on. And I think we might have made mention last time. Gravity pulls not towards the center of the Earth, but towards the center of mass. Yeah. So the center of mass is not at the center of the Earth for one reason, because we got the moon orbiting and the ocean tides, and then the
Mm,
continental tides due to the moon orbiting. Um, so at these places which are open as tourist attractions,
mm,
of course, not every vortex is open as a tourist attraction. At natural
right.
vortexes everywhere, you do find this phenomena where there's this bigger component of gravity pulling from the side, to the extent that water or even a ball will
Mm,
flow in a certain direction on a level platform,
mm,
or
mm,
even uphill, because uphill is still downslope in terms of the gravity pull. Yeah.
mhm.
So people will lean. This is something that's very well documented at at these vortexes like Oregon Vortex, Montana
And I've had the pleasure of visiting one of these spots, I think in Michigan.
Vortex.
And
There's a couple in Michigan. Hmm.
yeah, it was an interesting experience. I was 14. It was the first time I've ever experienced anything like it. And then we have a place where I lived for 30 years, just a street over. It was exactly like that. Cars could get pulled up going up the
Nice.
hill and would appear as though it was going by. And it was going on its own and people were running beside it. And I'd be just like, this is insane. It's like just insane. But it just chalks it up to how amazing our planet really is.
Mhm.
And we really do, I feel, need to understand it more, and because we can be in sync with it. And it's an incredible experience.
Well, when we are observant and we're cued in and we notice these things, such as people are leaning, plants are growing in unusual ways in response to this turbulent or unusual energy, animals are behaving in strange ways, the birds stay away, or the spiders are not good at building webs for some
Mm,
reason. Uh,
right, right.
these are vortex markers, and these things are happening everywhere. But when we're cued into it, we'll begin to notice it other places as well. It's great to go to the tourist attraction because they really know how to demonstrate the phenomenon. But
Mhm.
when
Mhm.
you're cued in, you're in a place, there's kind of an eerie silence, or the animals are acting in unusual ways, or the trees are growing in strange ways, or the hair stands up on your arms or the back of your
Mm.
neck, or some people feel it as like a tingling, an electrical tingling, or maybe a heat or a coolness. That's something people experience with hauntings as well. Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, you mentioned that if you ever had the opportunity again to go to a vortex. So tell us, what was opportunity one like, the one you didn't take, and why didn't you do it?
Well, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but I did mention I had a UFO sighting when I was 14, and
Yes.
they didn't invite me in. So
Oh,
I'm sure I wasn't ready then, but I'm
right.
just in terms of my spiritual growth, and I'll tell you how serious this is actually. Um, I pray and meditate that I'm totally willing to surrender to accepting my physical ascension now, my complete physical ascension now. It's pretty scary,
Mm,
really, because letting go of all the limitations and everything that we know and what we experience, and going through into some complete unknown, like that's what I'm intending to do. So
mm,
so it might look like going through a vortex. I of course have to trust my feeling about it, just like I would if I were invited on a ship. How do I know, you know, what their
mm.
agenda is unless I just trust my heart? Yeah.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I have to choose in the moment, but I feel pretty well protected and guided. I know I'm being, when I saw that ship, my feeling was they're looking at me,
Mhm,
and as much as they were turning on their lights for me, it was a message. They're looking at me.
mhm.
So anyway, I pray that I am ready to go through.
Okay. What
Yeah.
if it was easier? Let's talk about the Bermuda.
Okay.
Oh,
Let's bring it up to the moment. Sorry, there's part
okay,
two to
okay.
this.
You go ahead. You do that.
Okay,
Okay,
so
I'll catch up.
I hear from people all the time, and they tell me things which would be hard to believe in ordinary reality. But again, because I've had some miracles of my own, it's hard for me to disbelieve people. But I've actually had somebody contact me today, and they came through with the kind of message that really is an answer to a prayer. And so it's very tempting to the ego for sure,
Mm,
because the person actually, I mean, I could read you the text message thread. We've had some phone calls too, but I've got this phone call. This fellow named Jeffrey in, I think it's Missouri. And he's saying he's been guided to call me, that he's completed his ascension process.
mm,
Now, haven't been able yet, because I was working and coming to the podcast, haven't been able to ask him what he means by completed his ascension process. Because for me, that means my physical body becomes infinite, and I
mm,
can manifest a physical body of any sort, or two if I wanted, but just dropping all physical limitations. So I haven't asked Jeffrey what he means by but his message was he's completed his ascension process. He's been told to contact me. Now imagine, put yourself in my place, right? Okay.
mhm,
And he says that he has my spot where I need to come. He says I'm good now. I'm good where I am, but when I'm ready, I can come to Missouri. He's actually sent me some photos and video. He's like, "This is your spot. This is the dragons are coming through the clouds. This is your ascension spot. Come to Missouri."
mm. And what is your feeling on that? Do you believe him, or are you thinking, all right, are we quackers, or is this for real? Because that's really a lot to take in. You really have to be open to that.
I have to be open to it. This is my whole
Yes.
shtick. How can I not be open to that? But again, I definitely hear
But it's
from.
so random, though.
I'm not sure it's random, but in the
Mhm.
classical sense,
You're muted. Yes. Well, look at the bottom where your picture is. Did you touch? No.
I'm I
There you are. Okay, good.
okay. I might have found my problem. Let me move a cord.
Yeah, you're good. I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay. Woohoo.
Um,
All right.
so I have to be receptive in some degree, but I hear from both sides. I mean, I hear from people who I draw the line, and I do hear from some people who I think maybe have some mental, emotional, spiritual, physical
Sure.
issues, and
Sure.
but I hear from some very credible people as well. So how committed am I to? Yeah, I'm not sure. I have to confer with myself. Because if I yeah, I'm going to say I'm not convinced.
Right.
I'm afraid he's
Right.
going to hear this, but it's going to take. I'm going to have to tune in more to be convinced that that's my spot, and I'm going to make this journey to Missouri for my ascension. Because also part of my principle is that it's available everywhere. There's no separation between me and this spot in Missouri.
Right.
So,
Right.
but do I need to go there? I mean, I feel sure in our last show I said there is no need to go to that exotic vortex. You don't need to go to the Bermuda Triangle. There's,
Right.
first of all, a place near you, and secondly, you're just not separate right where you are.
Right. Right. And you can create your own vortex from what you're saying. So you could
Absolutely, we do. Yeah.
potentially
hmm
do it quite easily in a place that you're comfortable and familiar with.
Well, yeah, there's two parts though. One is you can do it anywhere, but other places are highly conducive. And part B, at a certain time.
Hmm. Okay. And why is that?
If we're gonna do that, I mean, the illusion of
Right.
time and everything, because I just said all the time,
Right.
right? But if we're gonna go, certain there's a time wave. It's charging, it's discharging. You have a
Mhm.
biorhythm.
Mhm. Right. See, to me, you could just make it easy. I mean, how many people go through, well, I'll say, for example, there are many triangles in the world. The Bermuda Triangle is the one everybody knows, but there are many triangles all over the world.
Right.
So it would be pretty easy. Just gone.
uh,
Right?
well, we could spend a whole show just on triangles.
Oh,
Okay, but
absolutely.
but
Yeah.
in which in fact, I'm going to do that because I'm putting together a comprehensive introduction to Earth magic. And when folks enroll in that course, I will actually spend a complete hour on just on triangles. So
I think there's a show coming
there's a lot to triangles. Well,
on
I mean,
triangles.
I've got 33. You can imagine I've got 33 shows lined up for this comprehensive introduction. But
Yeah.
when you're talking about equilateral triangles,
Right.
those, if you have three mountains, let's say, in
Okay.
more or less a perfect equilateral triangle, and these mountains, if you think of them as broadcasting an energy,
Mhm.
then what you get is a very stable waveform, because in this equilateral triangle, those waveforms support and reinforce each other. So
Mm.
that's one little bit about triangles in the landscape. But triangles themselves, there's various kinds of triangles that are interesting, from like the isosceles triangle, the 3-4-5 triangle, uh, uh, other triangles that approximate that 3-4-5 triangle. These are all interesting. The 72-degree triangle that ends up
Mm.
being like part of a pentagon. There's
Right.
so
Right.
triangles themselves, and they're like sacred geometry, all that built into, wow, now it's on the landscape. Either they're naturally on the landscape, or you've built one in your garden, or there's this massive one on the landscape between these certain I don't know, Masonic
Yeah.
buildings.
We touched on some of that. It's crazy. I mean, we could do a show on it. I would love to, because there is just, you need 2 hours,
Oh,
really.
you need time. The Bermuda Triangle itself, this is one of 12 points if you count the poles.
Right.
points around the Earth, right? Because you're looking at the points of the icosahedron and the dodecahedron and that Bermuda Triangle. That's
I think I might have
essentially
a picture. One second.
one of those. Actually, yeah,
I might
I
have a
can
picture.
I can pan the camera here.
Oh, I've got one right here. You tell me
Oh,
if this is what you have. You might have sent this. I'm not sure.
that's one of the versions of the
Okay.
geometric globe for sure. And there you get to see, boom, the Bermuda Triangle there is in a red triangle. Yeah,
Right.
and there's
Where
10
are
of
we here?
those.
Hold on. So
And
bring
then if
this
you
up.
include the
Get right in there.
sure, and then if
Right.
you include the poles there, that gives you the geometry of the, let me get this right, icosahedron. And then those, uh, well, this is showing all these struts. It's a little harder to see because it's on this type of a global projection. But
National Geographic. I thought it'd be safe. So,
you're telling me
well,
that's a Oh my
yeah.
gosh. What kind of National Geographic image is that? I'm going to have to do
I
some
don't know, but I thought it looked great.
triangles
We
of the
should
world
share it
map.
up. Yeah.
Well, you've taught me something. So
Yeah.
um, there's, if I, hmm, what you're seeing there is it's a projection of the Earth, obviously, so it's kind of spread out, but it's
Right.
actually what it is. It's the net of the icosahedron and the dodecahedron inscribed in the globe. So those red triangles there, and they've
Hmm.
got it right, and those triangles are slightly tipped, and that is correct. But that's the Bermuda Triangle and some essentially similar related points around the geometry of the Earth.
Mm.
And so, at that global scale, you've got a certain geometry or pattern. And then, of course,
Well, I don't think they're showing us the Alaska Triangle anywhere, are they?
well, the Alaska Triangle it's a little different thing.
See, yeah, there's a lot more
Um,
triangles, I
and
feel, than what they're showing here.
there's, well, this is the global system, but then it breaks down into like a smaller net as well. But then there's also these regional systems. But if you look up, you can see number 7 is up there, kind of in the Gulf of
Mm.
Alaska.
Oh,
Um,
right up here.
and again,
Yes.
this projection, I
Hmm.
wouldn't depend on it.
And
That's
every
not exact or anything, but there is another
right.
grid point right up there, and that's the one I've been closest to actually. I've had
Oh,
the great good fortune to be able to go up to Alaska there and actually put my face down on the bedrock, um, on land, not out in the ocean where that point actually is, but so close to that point. I felt the earth heal me, and it's visually, I mean, visibly, you could see, you can see it in my photos. If you look at photos, before I went to Alaska, I had kind of a chronic tension and squint
hmm.
in this eye, kind of a chronic tension on this side of my face, and I was healed by the grid. I put my face down on the bedrock, and I was so glad to be there. Prince Edward Sound, I think it is, and the orcas swimming past, and this crystal in the bedrock and everything, and my friend playing flute, and I cried. And that night, uh, I realized that wow, I don't have this chronic tension in my face
That's
anymore.
amazing. But
For years.
it's energy, frequency, vibration, all that stuff. I mean, it does heal.
It does, and
It
it's not
does
to
heal.
say that couldn't have happened anywhere, but I was there to kind of get as close to that grid point as I could, and the
Right.
energy there, I mean, it is just, of course, uh,
Right.
who wouldn't want to be in Anchorage? It's a beautiful spot.
Beautiful. It's beautiful, but also mysterious. Like there just seems to be so much, mystery and in some places history that surround these areas. Do you believe that the ancients deliberately settled around these places, these power spots?
I have to believe that I mean, I don't want to romanticize the
Right.
natives, but come on, they weren't subject to the kind of enculturation that we are today and the electromagnetic smog and
Hmm.
everything else, and the light pollution. They
Right.
were much more in touch with the night sky. They weren't
100%.
they weren't scrolling all day. So I have to
Right.
imagine that they were more conscious, but
Hmm.
also that they could find themselves like settling on an energetic point. subconsciously without the conscious intention. Now,
Just feeling drawn to an area. I mean, many ancient people throughout the world would build their temples on these places.
absolutely, on that global grid that we just saw, many
Mhm,
of those have ancient monuments built on them.
mhm,
And you don't have to go back into prehistory either. I have a map from a visionary geographer named Peter Champeau,
mhm,
showing the Mormon progression across the United States and where they set up settlements. And
mm.
in that map, you can actually see a geometric progression. So, whatever else you might believe about Joseph Smith and the Mormons, it does seem that on that level, he was tapped into some kind of landscape geometry because you can see it in the map itself.
Mhm. It's fascinating. It really is. On that note, I have to do a really quick station and sponsor ID. So, for those who are just tuning in, you are tuning in to the Outer Realm Radio. I am Michelle Desrochers. Our special guest tonight is the Vortex Detective Dan Shaw. And we're broadcasting on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network 105.3 and 107.7 FM, as well as Roku TV. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people at Folgers Coffee who have been with us since day one. Right? I know. Right there. Right there. There we go. And big thank you to Justin Snicker and big thank you to Steve McGinnis. We appreciate you all so very much. So we are talking about everything that has to do with energy vortexes, power spots, you name it. And where I want to go next, because again, it's hard. I want to cram everything in, but I really want to talk about Yosemite
Oh, okay.
and the
Love it.
Tree of
Love
Life.
it. Oh, wow. Okay. Sure.
Yes.
Uh,
I'm like a child. Yay. So,
okay. Me too.
okay.
Now, I have been studying vortex maps and this broader category of maps I call visionary maps
Right.
for some 30 years. And
Okay.
it started with these two maps. I'm going to pan the camera at this point, if you'll allow
Okay.
me.
There
This
we
is
go.
behind my mic stand there. That's the Earth star globe. It's a world map that folds up into a globe.
Wow.
And
Okay.
that's one we just saw actually with the icosahedron and the dodecahedron inscribed into the globe. And this is Bill Becker, Beth Hagen's developed this projection of that Earth grid, and that's called the Earth star globe. And years ago, I published that, as well as this other map above it here, and that is the west coast of the United States there, western half of the United States. And you can see these both in greater detail at vortexmaps.com. But that
Mm,
shows the Grand Tetons as the center of a nearly perfect circle of 19 significant mountains and bodies of water. So there's this exquisite landform uh, with the Grand Tetons at the center. It looks in some versions, it looks like a medicine wheel. And
it does. Yes.
those spokes go out across Mount Shasta, and they go out across Lake Tahoe, and they go out across Sedona, they go out across Lake Louise, and I
Hmm.
apologize for that. Um, and it's just a miracle my phone hasn't rung either, because I forgot to turn that off. I apologize. So there you have the what I call the wheel with 19 spokes, or the Earth Star North America. And that does show the geometric relationship between Shasta, Sedona, Mount Taylor, all these mountains on the west, bodies of water on the east. And one of the halfway points there is Mono Lake and Yosemite Valley. So those points all share this. They're all one. They all share this relationship with the Grand Tetons.
Hmm.
They're all on the periphery of this vast, vast circle. So Yosemite is just perfectly in that geometry there as well. Now,
Mhm.
it's a place that I've visited more than once, a couple of 3 times. In fact, the first tour I ever led, I was still in high school. I led a tour of a bunch of camp kids in Yosemite Valley. There,
Wow.
there was a show on the Travel Channel that was called Mysteries of the National Parks. Uh, and,
Right.
and one of them was Yosemite in season 2. And I appeared in that. if that show ever aired. I'm not sure it ever aired, but there were disappearances, legendary disappearances at Yosemite Valley. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
a girl who got separated from her parents had an experience of seeing people in period clothing, got reunited with her parents. And they
Hmm.
asked me to comment on that and could it potentially be a vortex? And I said, oh, yeah, there's all kinds of vortex markers going on in Yosemite Valley. There's this geometry that I mentioned. You've got the granite, the crystal, this, that, the other thing, Moto Lake,
Hmm.
elevational changes. I mean, reports of paranormal experiences, so much going on
Mm-hmm.
at Yosemite Valley. Now, what you're referring to, though, is this tree of life pattern.
I have your website up where it's got the hiking map with the.
Oh, okay. You can
Can I
certainly
put that
show
up?
that.
Do I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
your permission?
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've
So,
just put this up this page right here. Okay, there we go. There.
so beautiful. So, the tree of life there. That's from Jewish mysticism or Kabbalah.
Mm-hmm.
That geometry, and each of those points is called Sephiroth in the Sephirah or Sephiroth plural in Hebrew, and then the paths between the points are also significant. So
Mm.
if you are a student of Kabbalah, or if you look into the Kabbalah, you can see the like all the esoteric correlations, correspondences with those points and paths. So it turns out that this pattern overlays perfectly on the flower of life that Drunvalo Melchizedek talks about. And it also overlays perfectly on that globe that we just looked at with the icosahedron, dodecahedron inscribed in the globe. So this
Mm.
is one type of visionary map where, but in this case, this is one I created. So it's arbitrary in a certain sense. I'll give you that. But I thought, what would happen if I were to overlay the tree of life on Yosemite Valley?
Mm-hmm.
So I chose as the root chakra the entrance to the valley there, and then you know, I chose kind of the scale of the tree of life. But when I
Mm.
overlaid it on Yosemite Valley, it did kind of have a very nice fit. You have the floor of the valley, and then of course, the sides of the valley on both sides. And in Kabbalah, those two actually. Now, the tree of life here is inclining on its right side. You have to understand. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
if it were in its normal orientation, it would be look like three columns or three pillars. Yes, and a pillar on one side would be called the pillar of mercy, and the pillar on the other side would be called the pillar of severity. And you can actually overlay the tarot deck, the major arcana, on the Sephiroth in such a way that the cards actually correspond with the merciful cards on the one side and the severe cards on the other, if you
Mm.
follow me. And so it turns out that that river that flows through Yosemite Valley is called the Merced River, and the name Merced actually derives from the word for mercy. So that was a nice correspondence that emerged
Mm-hmm.
from
Very
this
interesting.
this
Very
exercise.
interesting. So, I mean, it's definitely an incredible area, but again, it's one of these areas loaded with mystery. Why are these places always loaded with mystery? Or or am I reading too much into it? Is it the whole planet that's just loaded with mystery, or is there something about these power spots that just do it?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is what I love is the mystery. I mean, I don't claim to have the answers to these questions. If I
Mm.
felt like I'd kind of answered the question, I would probably move on. But
Right.
because, I mean, this is a fun, mysterious adventure, and I am discovering things every day, and you and your listeners are part of how I do Vortex research because I hear from you and you tell me new things, and
Hmm.
things line up in a new way.
Right. And you have done and you speak about a lot of really incredible, like maps, for example, through all of this. I'm I'm really interested in the astrology part of it, the prophecies, the prophetical part of it, like
Yeah.
prophecy maps.
Yeah.
So what determines like a prophecy map?
Hmm. Well, I for years have been studying vortex maps
Hmm.
and other maps that come towards me, such as the prophecy map from Lori Toy
Hmm.
or the prophecy map from Michael Scallion, the I Am America map. There's these prophecy maps. They're often prophecies of earth changes and catastrophe. I prefer to think of gentle birth, that the earth can have a gentle birth and that it doesn't
Hmm.
have to be catastrophic.
Hmm.
So I didn't necessarily want to propagate or reproduce these maps of catastrophe. So I kind of set them aside. And then there
Hmm.
were these other maps that I came across that were like maps of appearances of the Virgin Mary. And so I kind of noted
Okay,
that and kind of
that's different.
set that aside. And then there was these maps, astrocartography maps, where I send in my birth time and place, and I get the planets mapped out on the Earth, so that I can see that as I move across the planet, I'm getting influenced by different parts of my astrological birth chart or my
Which
progressed
is
birth chart, right?
fascinating. Yes,
So
yes.
astrocartography, so that's really cool. But I'm going to set that aside to look at, just make sure, keep looking at vortex maps. So I had these various different kinds of maps coming to me.
Mm,
Uh, for example, like the map of Italy as a boot,
right.
right?
Okay.
So I like, interesting. I'll set that aside. So eventually, I put a book together called Supernatural Places and Visionary Maps,
Hmm.
and I focus more on all the different kinds of visionary maps, including vortex maps as one kind of visionary map. So, prophecy maps, these are maps in time, essentially. You can map anything. Anything that happens in time or space can be mapped. So, prophecy, we're talking about the future. So, we're mapping some future, and
Mm.
it's often cataclysmic. So, I generally don't focus on those.
Right, right, right.
Does
So
that
what?
answer your question? I mean,
Yes, no, it's
yeah, yeah,
interesting to me. What I was going to expand on it is, of course, when you look at some of these maps, you're going based on what the planet looks like now. What about the lost continents, like ancient Lemuria and the continent that was between India and Europe, like down in that area? I mean, we know it's underwater. We know it's all
right,
there. We see
right.
old bridge masses, and how do you incorporate that?
Yay, another great question.
Woo! Thank
Oh,
you.
okay. So
But,
sure. So
mm,
the Earth grid, is it evolving?
mm,
The tectonic plates are shifting. There's land
yeah,
mass. I mean, we're living on kind of the uh, if you were to boil some milk and there was a thin skin on the top, that's kind of
right.
our model of the globe, right? We've got this mantle that is molten, and then the crust that is,
Mm,
and I'll tell you, couple of days ago, there's been a couple of studies confirming that the core of the Earth, which does rotate at a different rate than the crust, the core of the Earth is actually slowing down. So we got that going on. Yeah.
mm,
And I'm not sure. I mean, also, like, the magnetic North Pole is speeding up, and the magnetic North Pole is moving and it's speeding up. And the sun is at the point in its 11-year cycle where its magnetic field is about to flip, and the Earth's magnetic field seems to be destabilizing. And instead of just having like a real clear north and south pole, we've got like a more of a muddied picture. It seems to be destabilizing before it does its magnetic flip. So we kind of have a lot going on now. Sorry, I got off a little bit. Where
no,
were?
no, no, that's okay. You go,
Oh,
you
okay.
go,
So
you
let me
go. Yeah, yeah,
continue. So
that's
so
okay.
it does appear that there are certain stable hotspots in the core of the Earth based on the geometry of the tetrahedron. So if you look at the tetrahedron inscribed in the globe, You get the points of the tetrahedron, one at the North Pole, the other points, the 3 points of the base triangle of the tetrahedron, coming out at 19.47 degrees south. And you can invert that with the point of the tetrahedron South Pole. Those other points come out 19.47 degrees north. And this is the Cydonia location on Mars that Hoagland talks about. You see this 19.47 or 19.5 latitude in the Hawaiian Islands, which is a stable hotspot in the core of the Earth. And you see that 19.5 landmark also at Mount Emikusi in Chad, one of the highest land masses, landforms in that part of Africa. So we see on Earth and also Mars and other planets, we see this tetrahedral geometry, and we see it as a stable hotspot in the core of the Earth. So even as the tectonic plates are shifting, I think that geometry is still expressing itself.
Okay, quick question. How do pyramids, because these create their own energies, how does that affect all of these power spots or ley lines or vortexes that are within the vicinities?
Okay. Wow.
Curiosity, just because I've been to the Great Pyramid. I've been to a few pyramids, actually, and they're very energetic just on their own.
For sure. And I'm going to just suggest that there is a theory out there that the pyramids were built as a way to help stabilize the planet. Okay, so I believe the author's name is John Shaughnessy.
Okay.
And there's a book out there about the pyramids and how they have an effect of stabilizing the Earth grid. And I would say plausible based on there's certain geometries between volcanoes and built pyramids. So now pyramids themselves, energy has shape and shape has energy.
Right.
So the Great Pyramid, it's built at the specific angle, which is 1/7 of a 360-degree circle. That Great Pyramid angle is like 51.51, or essentially 360 divided by 7. I think that's how we establish the true angle of a pyramid that has maybe, eroded over time. So that angle has a specific energy to it. And it may have been built to have a beneficial effect on its immediate surrounding environment. And it may have been built to have a global effect on the energy grid. In our version of the Earth grid, we use a point north of the Great Pyramid, which is now inundated, but would at one time and have been dry land and has no doubt has temples there. But just north of the Great Pyramid, that's kind of our orienting point for our Earth grid. So the correlation of that, of course, that it may have been built for good, was that it may have been built for more of what I would say not good or evil, and kind of a control agenda, as you kind of alluded to before, that anything
it can happen,
and then that people can be helping to rebalance and harmonize these spots, or people may be using them for more of a control agenda. So
that's interesting. It's funny you say that, because something recently came up in my timeline about certain things with a certain pyramid. But I mean, we have pyramids all over the world. So
we do.
We have power spots all over the world, and vortexes and ley lines. And so I just find it interesting. I just sort of wondered if they worked in correlation together, if they complemented one another. I just want to get to a couple of quick questions. One, have you ever investigated Skinwalker Ranch? There's a property loaded with anomalies. Vortexes, triangle.
There's a short answer, really, because the answer is no.
Okay.
But I don't want to skip over your pyramid question either, because
no. Okay.
I want to, if I may, just kind of round that out.
Let's go back to it, because we've answered
on
it.
that.
Sorry, Kathy. No. Okay, go back.
I wish I had more to say about Skinwalker Ranch. Um,
Yeah.
the
Maybe you need an invite.
and again, this is just a brief introduction, but I can
Yes.
suggest like a direction for people's future research. And in fact, uh, in my Stonehenge gardening tips book, I specifically talk about when you have a pyramid, let's say in your garden, you can build a pyramid, let's say out of an energetic material like copper pipe.
Yes. That's a
So
big one. Yeah.
you've built it to hopefully a, a good angle. Maybe it's the pyramid angle. You kind of have to feel for yourself if that's the angle you want.
Mm.
But once you've got your pyramid, whatever angle it might be, then you have the opportunity to plant plants in the pyramid at ground level, above ground level, and even above the pyramid.
Mm.
And then outside of the pyramid, I would suggest that you would find different effects at different distances from the pyramid, based, of course, on the dimensions of the pyramid and perhaps that angle. If you
Right.
saw energy coming out of the pyramid in this kind of a fashion,
Mm-hmm.
kind of concentric circles, let's say, you might have varying effects at different distances. So thanks
Right.
for letting me tie that knot.
No, pleasure. Thank you for tying it on. All right. Last one, because we're getting up to the top of the hour. Would a vortex be like looking through water, so causing a visual effect?
Very much so. Very much so. In the Vortex Field Guide book, I use that refraction as an analogy, and there's a photo of a glass of water with a ruler in it. But you see the same thing, in a clear glass vase with the stem of a rose, let's say, where there's that
Mm.
refraction. And because of the different densities, you get this visual effect. Now we know that refraction, that's not a physical effect, that's a visual effect. There's an analogous thing in vortexes, which we're not sure it's visual, it could be physical.
Mm.
And you can also there's a scientific technique called Schlieren photography where you can actually take photographs of the density of air, and there's kind of a classic picture of a candle flame, and then the different densities of the air above the candle flame made visible by this technique. Involves a laser called Schlieren photography.
Wow. Well, this has been super informative, as I knew it would be. And of course, it just never seems like we have enough time. So I'm down for part 3. We could just keep
Wow.
going. But
Thank you.
abs-
Thank
oh,
you.
pleasure. It's just there's so much information. It's just overwhelming. And I think I just had the air conditioner. 1 second.
Mm. Thanks again for the
Apologies.
Ultra's coffee.
Always, here it is. Always. But thank you. So chime off your website, please. It
Sure.
has been scrolling across, but I want our listeners to hear it.
Sure. Well,
Anything you
actually,
have coming up, please put it up. Yes.
sure, you bet.
Let's
DanShaw.com, that's a little more of the everything non-vortex. Vortexmaps.com. That one is everything vortex. And again, you can contact me through those. I will answer every email, and I will send you a free ebook, How Vortexes Affect Us. And so thanks for listening. Thanks for making the time for me.
Oh, that's a pleasure. Thank you for spending the evening with us. Yes.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah. I will be in touch, and I definitely would love to book it again and
Oh,
and
nice.
and keep going.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
great. I'm sure we don't have to retread old ground.
No, there's so much information. I think we just have to. It's like we've covered so much, but there's so much more to cover. Maybe we could just go over like one of your courses. I would really like to do the triangles
Wow.
because I think that would take, a good couple of hours. I say let's do triangles,
Oh my gosh.
right?
Great.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. Let's
Okay.
spend a couple of hours and just get like really hardcore into it.
There's our cliffhanger.
All right. Bum, bum, bum. That was segue right into another one. Okay. I like it. That sounds outstanding. Okay. So I will be in touch with you. And I thank you again for joining us.
Nothing else I'd rather do, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I will email you and we'll set up a date.
Yay. Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Well, everybody, that was another fantastic segment here on the Outer Realm. Just so much information and just not enough time to go through everything. So, thank you all for tuning in. Everybody in chat, you make it just that much better. I love your questions, your comments, and thank you because you make our guests always feel so much at home. And we love it. Relax. We love to have a good time, but we love the energy and the information to flow. So thank you. Big thank you, Aldra, to Folgers Coffee for sponsoring not just tonight's show, every night's show. Thank you, Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, aka Justin Snicker. Thank you, Steve McGinnis. We appreciate you so much. Also, please watch for the archives to be on Roku. They do show up. You might find them on Rumble. You'll find it on our Rumble as well. So you can check that out. Tomorrow night, I won't even say next week. Tomorrow, guys, is going to be a pre-record because we welcome back Mark Ollie. He is in England, and starting a show at 2 a.m. is very, very difficult. But I will try to join you all in chat. However, what I'm going to do, which is a little bit different, is at 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon is when I'm going to be recording this show with Mark Ollie, but I'm going to do it in live mode. So anybody who subscribes to the channel will be able to get and to see the live show, and will be able to get into the chat room and talk and ask questions. So what's the topic of discussion going to be tomorrow? The real Da Vinci Code. Mark is an archaeologist. He's a historian. He is just does so much. He does so much. He has been on the show so many times, and he's scheduled for more because he just has so many things to talk about. So, as per request, tomorrow will be the real Da Vinci Code. So catch us at 2 p.m. Eastern during the day while we go through the recording. It will only be on the Outer Realm YouTube channel. So if you don't subscribe, I hope you will subscribe and tune in and get into the chat room. Have a little bit of fun with us. Mark is delightful, and we always have a lot of fun. He is a wealth of information. And then the pre-recorded show will then go live tomorrow evening, and I will hang with you guys in the chat room. So thank you all, and good night. We'll see you tomorrow, hopefully.